Well, good morning. I'm here at the Brigham City Airport today. It's actually a pretty remarkable airport, very long runway, which would work well in case we have a national emergency and say Hill is destroyed, which would be bad. But why I'm here today is I'm going to take a look at a means of transportation that probably terrifies most people. Well, I take it back. It doesn't really terrify anybody anymore, but these do. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about a time where it turned out the apostles were in a boat. They were in a boat, and while they were in that boat, a storm came up. Jesus had had a very long, hard day, and he decided that what he needed to do was to take some rest. I'll let you watch this plane take off behind me back here. This is pretty cool. But in the process of being in this storm, they found themselves challenged by the fact that they might actually die. Now, I don't think there's any boat that we go in today that gives you that same kind of desperate feel. But in a plane like this behind me, people have that kind of reaction. So I want you to imagine for a second that you are actually in that process of dying in a plane. I've had that experience once in my life, and it was terrifying. Another plane taking off behind me. There he goes. So can you imagine yourself being literally close to death because every part of the circumstance tells you that you're going to die? In the boat that day, they had experts on the water at the Sea of Galilee. And those experts were not overreacting. They knew when things were going to go bad. So let me read the passage for you first. I'm going to get out of this noisy area. And it's a passage that you know very, very well. Let me read that passage to you first. And then we'll come back to it and talk about what we should have done, what they should have done. And I think this is the new insight for me as I started to take a look at this story all over again for the first time. What should the apostles have done? Jesus chastised them, you'll see in just a second as we read it. But what should they have done? And do I do that today? Or do I still fail to do that? And are my actions actually an indicator of potentially defective faith? Let's talk about that. I'll come back in just a second. Okay, so I said probably one of the scariest things. Oh, look at our camp t-shirt. You know what that says? That's Jesus in Hebrew, Yeshua, detour. So I said that most people would not be afraid of, say, getting in a boat or even in a large airplane these days. There is not a sense of terror. But even in the story we're going to read in just a second, the apostles were in this boat with Jesus, and there were several people on the boat that knew the lake. Now, I've been to the Sea of Galilee several times, and you take a look at it and you think, there's nothing dangerous about this. But there is actually something quite dangerous about it. Because it's in a depression with hills around it, it does something with the winds. And periodically, it does get whipped up into a crazy kind of storm is what happens there. But you wouldn't believe it to see it. In fact, Sea of Galilee is about the same size as Utah Lake, if you've ever been to Utah Lake. But Utah Lake is out in the flat, in the open. The Sea of Galilee is in a depression. Anyway, there were experts in the boat. So when they got to this storm, some of them could say with great authority, we're all going to die. We don't have that experience unless I put you in a small plane. If I put you in a small plane, 9 out of 10 people will kind of tense up and say, well, I don't know about this. I mean, after all, what's between me and the ground? A thin skin of aluminum, pretty much. I mean, you really sense the fact that, excuse me, you really sense the fact that you really don't have much between you and the ground. And you feel the fact that you're actually being carried on air. You get that sense. And as the air has upwellings and you hit those, you bounce a little bit. I mean, it's a very different experience. I love it. I totally love it. My good friends Glenn and Wayne both took me up in the air a lot, and I loved every second of it. But for most people, that's terrifying. Now imagine that you're in that small plane and suddenly the engine dies. Those planes depend on lift, and lift on the wings depends on fast air over the top and bottom of the wings. So when you don't have velocity, when you're not moving through the air, you have no lift and gravity wins. So when you lose your power, you can glide a little bit, but you have to dive. You have to dive in order to keep your wind speed up. So there's air over the wings that creates lift. So you have to go into a relatively steep decline. It's not level flight, just to keep your airspeed up, just to keep you supported in the air. And compounding that is the sense that you're going to hit the ground pretty soon because you're diving towards it. It's terrifying. It's terrifying. If that engine goes out, you're going to go to the ground. Now, the issue is just how well you're going to go toward the ground. And a good pilot will constantly be looking out their window, even when nothing's wrong. They'll be looking out the window in order to scope out the ground to see a potential landing spot if indeed the engine stopped right now. That's what they do all the time. And they're always training themselves to do that. And how far away can that landing place be? Well, they're trained also to know what the glide slope of the plane is. If it loses power, how much does it have to descend per second in order to keep the airspeed up in order to preserve lift? So there's only a radius cone around the plane that you can land. If you spot a place too far out, you can't glide that gently to get there. If it's too close, well, then it's very likely that you won't be able to continue to recover your flight if you're in a dive, basically. There's a lot of problems with all of that stuff. Pilots are constantly, especially small plane pilots, looking for that place they'll land when the engine stops. And in the process of you gliding with nothing but the air of the wind over your wings, you know you're going to be on the ground in a short amount of time regardless. That can be terrifying. Terrifying. It's happened to me once before with a friend of mine from high school who ended up becoming a pilot for the Air Force, but he had a small pilot's license when we were in high school and a little after that, and we went up all the time, and I loved it. And he decided one time that what we would do is we would fly down to an area that was about 50 miles south of us and land on a small farm strip, this near Hollister, California, and land on this small farm strip. But as we circled around the area where the ranch was, we didn't see any strip for small planes. So he decided, unwisely, it was time to land in a field that didn't have any crops in it. It had just been turned. And as we came around over and over again, coming and reducing our altitude, just so we could look out the windows and see how good the ground was, it looked pretty good. It was just brown. There were no plants. There's it looked okay. But when we made our last pass circling around looking at it, I realized what it looked like, maybe less like golf ball size clods of dirt, was actually football size. And that's roughly, maybe half the dimension of the wheels. And so if the wheels caught on these, it could be dangerous. Plus there was barbed wire fence bordering both ends of the field we were going to do it from. Needless to say, I didn't die, but when we finally did get on the ground, after some, I got to admit, very heroic maneuvers on my friend's part, when we got on the ground, I opened up my door on the passenger side. I fell out of the plane because my knees wouldn't work. My legs wouldn't work. I fell out of the plane onto this dirt clod field and pointed my finger back at my pilot, who was still sitting behind the controls, and said, "Don't ever do that to me again." So I'm here. But I was pretty sure we were going to die that day. Small planes are a terror. But to fishermen who know a lake, who've been on that lake and make a living on that lake, when a storm whips up and they say, "We're all going to die," everyone in the boat was sure of it. Let's read the passage. I'm reading out of Mark 4. It turns out that Mark, I think, is the most descriptive of the 4 passages. So let me just read it for you. I have 3 passages. This is from Mark 4. "So on that day when evening had come, he said to them," this is Jesus, said to them, "Let's go across to the other side." And leaving the crowd, they took him with them in the boat just as he was. And other boats were with him, other boats too. And a great windstorm arose. It's my best sound effect. And the waves were breaking into the boat so that the boat was already filling, but he was in the stern asleep on a cushion. It had been a long day for Jesus. And they woke him and they said to him, "Teacher, don't you care that we are perishing?" Pretty strong words. And he awoke, and he rebuked the wind, and said to the sea, "Peace, be still." And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. And he said to them, "Why are you so afraid? Have you still no faith?" And they were filled with great fear and said to one another, "Who then is this that even the wind and the sea obey him?" Who then is this? So this was early in Jesus' ministry, but not prior to him doing other miracles. They'd seen him do miracles. But who can command? Who can stop the chaos of the wind and the chaos of the waves in the sea by speaking to it, by commanding to it? Who alone in all of our known understanding of the universe can speak and things happen? God himself. And that's exactly the point that I made to the high schoolers about a week ago. Jesus is more than he appears to be, and they surely realized that when he spoke to the elements, and they obeyed. Now, my question to us is a little bit more focused than just that. So let me propose this. So he rebukes them for their little faith and for the fact that they're fearful, right? But what should they have done? Or if I put myself in their shoes, what should I have done? And I want to propose this. And this is the new thought for me. This is the new take that some of these passages are arising in my heart and my thinking as I pray about these things. Would I have, if I had full faith, would I have just sat in the boat, watched the water come over the gunnels, come over the edges, and then watched us take on water and say, "Oh, he's got this," when he's asleep in the stern? Or would I have done even more? Would I have said to the guys, "Hey, you know what, we'll be okay. I'm really tired too, so I'm going to go back, join Jesus in the back, and take a nap," while the storm and the sea is raging all around them? Now, even when I propose that, I ask myself, is that reasonable? I mean, would I actually do that? And that's where the conviction came in for me. The conviction for me is the fact that if I am not afraid, because Jesus rebuked them for being afraid, if I'm not afraid, then my actions will represent that by me just sitting calmly and finding some rest between a very busy schedule that Jesus had. Would I have also likewise looked for a pillow and taken a nap in the back while the waves were raging about me? I'll let you think about that for a second. And let me describe some of the technicalities of the boat. Here's a picture of the boat as we know it today. It's a very simple boat. In this particular case, could hold maybe 15 people. So if we're talking 12 apostles and Jesus, that fits. But it's full. It's full is what we're trying to say. Here's a picture, too, of a boat that I can't say unearthed, but there was a drought one year in Israel in the mid-'80s. And it turned out that the level of the lake reduced, and so all the silty mud on the edges started to reveal stuff that was sunk in it, and they found the remains of a first-century boat, probably very representative of the one that Jesus and the apostles were in. So it's about 25 to 28 feet long. And interestingly enough, these boats, in order for them to be able to, after fishing, come up close to shore, they had a very shallow draft, which means they didn't have hulls that were in cross section like this. It had a hull that was very flat almost, and because of that, if you know anything about maritime physics, because of that, it's easily tipped over and capsize very easily. So, especially if it's full. But with that flat bottom, they could pull the boat almost right up onto the shore and not get stuck in the mud, and then pull up any nets that they have that they already have fish in them. I mean, we've seen these scenes in the New Testament. But these boats were easy to capsize. If you've ever been in a canoe, you have the same idea. You get in the canoe, and the canoe won't capsize this way. It'll capsize this way, right? It'll capsize left, right. You step in the canoe, As a Boy Scout, you're always taught step in the middle of the canoe where the keel would be right in the middle. Because if you step anywhere off the center line of the canoe, it goes over. And it has such a shallow draft because of that it doesn't take it to turn much until water comes flooding inside of it. That was the boats they used in Galilee. They were easy to tip, but easy to pull up on shore. They usually had one mast. Here's a picture of that mast. A single mast and a single yard they went across the top, a yard arm we call it, but a yard across the top, that they used only in very controlled wind circumstances. But when they got in this boat and headed out into the middle of the lake, the storm comes up and they all realize we're sitting low in the water because we got almost the limit of weight in the boat with 13 people. And also the waves are big enough and the draft is so shallow, it doesn't take much of a wave to lap over into the boat. So the experts on the lake, the fishermen that were there, guys like Peter and Andrew and James and John, they look at the situation and they know this is dangerous. We have to get off the water. This is dangerous. So they inform the other apostles, who probably are not as good of not only fishermen, but boat guys. And they instill this fear that we are going to die. And trust me, I've seen this before. So would we have gotten up and said, Peter and Andrew, you guys just, it looks okay to me. I think I'll just go back and sleep, alongside Jesus because I'm really tired too. We've had a long day. Would I have done that? I don't think I would have, because when the reality of the dangers come upon your life so dramatically, when those realities crush you with your concern, the last thing you do is go passive. You go active. You figure out how to get to shore. You figure out that's what danger does for you. It tends to give you a clear vision about how to get out of danger. But in this particular case, from a spiritual perspective and from a reality perspective, you get out of danger by drawing near to Jesus. Why are you so afraid? They said, let me quote it exactly as said, what Mark records. He says, why are you so afraid? Have you still no faith? So faith can actually eradicate fear, even though it does not necessarily eradicate the circumstances that are threatening you. Now hear that again. Faith can eradicate fear, but not necessarily because your faith moves God to act to stop the circumstances. Now in this case, that did happen. Jesus got up and commanded this to the storm. But before that happened, Jesus is saying that while it was happening, your faith should have allowed you to not be fearful. The key is understanding who God is, who Jesus is, who Yeshua is, and understanding who he is gives you a clarity to be able to see what other people cannot see. Our vision is limited to reality, to the things that come down on top of us. But there's a second kind of vision that faith affords. And faith is an assurance of things you can't see. It's an assurance of what's going to happen. Faith allows you with sight to be able to, faith sight, to take actions that are in concert with that understanding, that belief, that faith. And in doing so, act accordingly. And I believe in this particular case, acting accordingly would have been joining Jesus in the back of the boat for a snooze. And you're probably thinking, I don't know about that. But that's exactly what Jesus is challenging us to do, is that in the midst of very visual threats, in the context of it, not waiting for it to change, in the context of it, you can sidestep fear by exercising faith, which comes from understanding who God is, which comes from understanding who Jesus is. We can sidestep fear. Now, why can we sidestep fear by knowing that? Well, the realities of dangers are easy to understand, but the realities of God's loving kindness, his persistent loving actions toward us, the reality of those things we very seldom invoke when in the midst of a conflict. Indeed, the next time we're in, it doesn't have to be life-threatening, but it's something that keeps you awake when you lie down at night and your head hits the pillow and all you can think about is what could happen, how bad this could become, how threatening this really, really is. We have great understanding of reality and our imagination goes crazy painting a picture for how bad it can get. But in that case, how do you combat that? Because that's real. That's totally real. How do we combat it? We combat it by bringing back to mind who is the one who saved me and who loves me. Who is the one who's actively engaged on my part? Who is the one that I would like to have in my boat right now? Because it turns out he is. He is. And this circumstance does not trouble him because he's the God of the universe. And that circumstance shouldn't trouble us. I know it does, and I'm not saying to ignore that. But what I am saying is that there is another reality that we very seldom visit when we're being threatened by reality. And that reality is the reality of God's persistent love and ability to save us. And we place ourselves in his hands. That's the reflex we have to start developing. That's the reflex I have to start developing. There's many things that threaten my thinking that keep me awake at night. And if you don't know what those things are to you, then you're not paying attention. There's something that does that. But when we're in the midst of that, as a reflex, you can say, okay, that's all true. I see the potential of danger to me, but I give thanks to the Lord because he's good, because his loving kindness, his acts of devoted love toward me are everlasting. They don't stop, and they haven't stopped in the midst of this. Now, will God stop the danger? He may not. That's not really the point. The point is whether or not we realize that he is a greater reality than the danger itself. And until we come back and remind ourselves what we've read in his word, how he's been faithful in the past of our histories, until we, as a reflex, go back to that, then the only thing we'll see is the danger. Whereas what we do need to do is realize that the danger is meaningless when Jesus is in our boat, and he is. He is. So that's about all I had to say this morning, and that was a challenge to me. I need to not only trust that God will change the circumstance, which is what I've normally done, but I need to do in the midst of the circumstance, imagine myself crawling into the back of the boat, becoming near to Jesus, resting my head on the pillow, and say to him, you got this, right? I do. Let's take a nap. Thanks for being with me this morning. Thanks for tolerating these crazy little videos. Many people have said they like them, which surprises me. But the last thought I want to suggest to you is this. This is such a familiar passage, right? I mean, you know it so well. Such a familiar passage. Is it possible for very familiar passages that I've read over and over and over, and I know by heart, I can almost recite them from memory? Is it possible that these passages have more for us? Because that's what surprised me here. They do. I don't think we'll ever get to the end of plumbing the depths of the truth about who God is and his loving kindness toward us in these stories. We'll never get to the bottom of it. And even when you read it and study it for routine use, like teaching high schoolers about how unusual Jesus is, we come away changed every time. So read the word, and you won't be bored, even though you've read the section before. So I'll be back with you in a little bit, and praise God, he blesses us with his nearness all the time. Whether you can see it or not, he's in the back of your boat. I'll see you next time.